So the Roman Church took the people out of the equation. The Reformation Church brought back the music. Luther brought the music back to church. He brought back the people studying the Scriptures. But he left in the infant baptism and all the other bad things he shouldn't have left in. And so the church began to decline again and get institutionalized until there was the outbreak of the modern kind of freeing of the church into independent churches instead of being under a hierarchy. You notice most of these, the Lutheran hierarchy, the Presbyterian hierarchy, the Episcopalian hierarchy, the Reformed hierarchy, and the Roman hierarchy. These churches don't have hierarchies down here. They don't have big time usually. Now I know that there's Assemblies of God, but there's an autonomy a lot within charismatic churches. The Baptist churches, there's a Southern Baptist Convention, but there's still a lot of individual autonomy that you would never have up here in these more what do we call them, monarchical episcopate type of things, where you have a high-up bishop or somebody over the whole thing. But back to charismatics. What's interesting is, if we've gone from the early church to the Reformation to the world mission era, it's almost like we're on a journey. And look where we are. Now, why would the charismatic event be going on in our world today? Well, it could be that God is allowing something to happen because who is most involved right now in the world with the poor people? The Bible church movement? No. The Baptists? Not really. Not most of them. Who is most on the front lines of world missions right now? Not a lot anymore from here. It's here now. Now, with all their errors, and by the way, tons of errors. The Bible is very clear about gender-specific roles. There's great confusion about that here in the charismatic church. Pastor, Mr. and Pastor, Mrs. There is great confusion about the gifts. But there was great confusion about the gifts here too. I always remember Corinthians was written to a vibrant church. They had a lot of confusion within a vibrant church about the Lord. In fact, almost everything we know about our resurrection body, almost everything we know about the judgment seat of Christ comes within the context of this church that had all the charismatic problems. But they were real believers. They had all those problems. Real believers that were misusing the gifts. And so what we have to be careful is, because we do have lots of stuff that's not in the Scriptures here, we cannot take the whole thing and ditch it. Because the errors of the charismatic church are not at all like the errors of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church errors are damnable. If you believe Roman Catholic doctrine, you may not go to heaven. If you believe the majority of charismatic doctrine, you'll still go to heaven. Do you understand the difference? This is a problem with salvation. Now, I'm not talking about out here. There are, yes, I know, lots of really heretical things floating out here because there's no restraint. But I'm talking about just what we would call the old Pentecostal movement. Do you remember the old Pentecostal movement where people they'd all come forward and get on their knees and pray on the altar, and people would kind of be excited in the services? Did any of you, I remember when I used to live in the South, I'd go once in a while just for fun to a Pentecostal church, just because they didn't ever get staid and placid. I mean, if the pastor said something, they get all excited about it. And when they sang the songs, they'd run around while they sang them. You know what I mean? There used to be one guy, he would, I forget his name. What was his name? Sunshine. I used to love to go to Tabernacle. It was a Pentecostal church. And Sunshine, you'd see him. He'd always sit in the back, and about the fourth song, he'd be standing there, and he'd be going, whoop, whoop, whoop. And he'd just start getting worked up. And pretty soon, by the fifth song, he'd be running laps. And he'd jump up on the platform, run behind the pastor, jump off, run over there, go out the door, run back in. And you know what? It got the whole church excited. And they would all start singing even more. And I thought, great, sunshine. We need a sunshine in every church. You know what I mean? I don't recommend it. But I'm saying we get kind of cold. And we get kind of what bothers me Dr. Bill, I'm so glad you asked this so I could talk so long about it. But what bothers me is, like this morning, what song did we sing this morning that made most of us feel a little bit uncomfortable? Yes, Mrs. Kenworthy. Yes. And I'm so glad we got to sing it sitting down because I could do something with my hands down here where no one could see it. Why do we have so many songs about lifting hands? Why do we have the New Testament church lifting their hands? Why do we have the Old Testament believers raising their hands and we don't? Because of this. We don't want to associate with anything that's erroneous, even though we have all of our own errors. And so we throw out something that's in the Bible. New Testament, 1 Timothy 2. I would that all men everywhere prayed, lifting holy hands. So if you were a godly man, you lifted holy hands as you prayed. We wouldn't think of it. In fact, we'd ask people to sit in the back because it might, offend someone. How can you be offended when you're doing something that is actually commanded? I would that all... In fact, you ought to read that sometime. Read what Paul said. I would that all men everywhere prayed, lifting holy hands. And so what we say is they were doing it at home, right? Then why does the next verse say the public reading of Scripture? I don't know. And so we have to be very, very careful. And I'm not advocating anything except to say that we need to be careful when we think of Episcopalian, Lutheran, Presbyterian, Reformed, Baptist, and Methodist, and the whole Wesleyan Nazarene movement, and the Charismatics, and some of the Oasis movement, which is the evangelical part, if there is such a thing, of Romanism. It's called the Oasis movement, which, by the way, is a charismatic Roman Catholic Church. Isn't that, an oxymoron? A charismatic Roman Catholic Church. But what's happening is that the part of Romanism that's true is resonating with the part of Charismatics is true, and so you have this new group over here starting all over the world where they don't know what they are because they can't understand all the errors of the Roman Church, and they love the worship of Jesus Christ personally. All that to say that the church, in fact, Charles Haddon Spurgeon, remember, preached the 3 surprises of heaven? Remember Spurgeon, the greatest Baptist preacher of all time? He said, my first surprise in heaven will be that I get there. Isn't that? Think about that for a while. That I get there. I mean, he is so elect, he had a big E right there. He is elect. He was so humble, he says, if I awaken in heaven, it's so much God's grace, I'll be surprised. Because I don't deserve to be there. I think all of us should feel that way. Second surprise is, he said, all the people that I was sure were going to be there won't be. And the last surprise is all the people I didn't think were going to be there are there. That was 140 years ago he said that. Interesting thought, which I think has to do with this. There's so many people we think won't be there. There's so many people we think for sure will be there because they agree with us. And in the midst of that, we spend so much time shooting our wounded brethren instead of the enemy. And I think in our case, we have to be careful about shooting these people. And I think we have to be careful about shooting these people and shooting these people. And we always have to be wary of this because there still is believers within Romanism.